Good morning. Thanks to those who came. My name is Adi Simone, and my master's thesis presentation, Cultural Integration Through Language Learning. The title has slightly changed since the beginning. Now, self-directed in-country language learning for cultural integration. It's more precise than what it was at the beginning. I started a bit broad, but I'm happy I did to end up here. So before I start, a bit about myself. I'm from Montreal, Canada, where I grew up in French with a Quebecer father and in English with my American mother, living in Canada. And then in 2010, I got accepted here to UID, where I thought, hey, maybe I'll try learning the local language because I come from a place that has a lot of issues dealing with their culture and the local language. So I thought I'll give it a go. And I took a total of 4 courses during the first year of my stay here in Sweden, and I became conversational and able to converse with people at parties and understanding the life around me better. The year after Umeå got accepted at Harman International in Shenzhen, China, where I thought, well, I did this once, why not try to do it again? So I took one-on-one classes, and then I started making Chinese friends slowly, and I got also kind of conversational in Chinese, and completely different experience, but the benefits I was seeing from learning the language were the same. After that, from Harman, I was invited to Germany, where I could practice the German I had learned in my bachelor's. I had taken 2 years, but it's university language courses in a country where German is not native, so it's a bit hard to practice. So this was a good opportunity. And then I realized there must be other people like me. Turns out there are. The International Labor Organization says there's about 175 million migrant workers around the world. So a lot of you actually probably like me have, for some part of your life, lived abroad in a situation where a different language was spoken locally. So I'll give you an example of a migrant. So here we have Sarah from Umeå, who got a job in Beijing, and she decides to take it, so she goes there. And she's living a good life. She likes to eat these things, not too sure what they are. After a time, though, she starts feeling a bit isolated because, well, all she eats is dumplings. And she decides to learn a bit of the language, and there she learns that they're not called dumplings, but they actually have 4 different names in Chinese for something that only had 1 name in English. And great quote by Ludwig Wittgenstein: "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Different cultures have different words for a lot of different things. This is a good example. And I thought, how do I take the situation of migration, living in a different culture, and improve upon this? So I'm going to take you through my process: research, ideation, building of several prototypes, iteration on that, and then the result. This is kind of what I did instead, but I'll tell you about this in this order. So systems I tried. There are many language learning companies in the world, so I tried as many as I could. Then I talked to a bunch of different people who were living in different countries, have moved to a different country permanently for reasons of asylum or for immigration because they met someone, and who have successfully or unsuccessfully learned the language. People I watched. So I shadowed some people. I went to local Swedish learning workshops here. Then I read a bunch of books and papers that were quite helpful. Then I had lots of ideas about how to present language learning. And I built 5 of them, which I will detail and demo. Then I'll talk about lin'guage, my resulting service. So as far as the research goes, for the existing methods, I talked about my previous experience. You can take a course in a class that is very helpful for some people. Some others don't relate to it as well. Some are purely book-based. Some are digital plus book plus any combination of these. So this is a list of systems I have tried. A lot of them are very one-dimensional, so they greet you with their beautiful graphics, and then they have you repeat the same exercise over and over again with different content element. Some of them are very loose, and they just have you meet someone else over Skype. Then you have to kind of become friends over having nothing in common. That was a bit awkward and strange, and you end up having the same conversations over and over again. I taught French for a few sessions also using these. And just to explore a bit further, I ended up learning some Cantonese, Finnish, and Korean along the way. Then I proceeded to do a bunch of in-depth interviews with some people, in person or over Skype. And I wanted to know, and these were all people that I knew had moved to a different country for at least some time and learned or failed to learn a language, and their stories and how they were dealing with it. So I was really asking them about how they went about on a day-to-day basis learning the language. What was the tools they were using? So if they were reading the newspaper, how did they read it? How did they make sense of the words they didn't understand? And did they write those down, for example? How important was it to them to be able to read, to write, to speak, or to listen, and to classify those? How did they live the language, and what particular difficulties existed? So for example, for someone who speaks English who's going to learn French, there's a lot of conjugations in French. There's 17 verb tenses. That's not easy. Or someone who was learning Turkish told me that if you raise your head like this, it means no. That's not going to be in a dictionary. That was really interesting to find out. I spoke with 3 language learning system founders. David Mansouri, founder of the Polyglot Project, who I had monthly hour conversations with, who is not a particularly official tutor, but just a partner to bounce ideas with. Alan Park, founder of FluentQ, and Aaron Myers, founder of the Everyday Language Learner blog. Then I spoke with 2 polyglots. Polyglots, for those who may or may not know, are people who speak 4 or more languages. And then people who speak 6 or more languages are considered hyperpolyglots. That's a bit fancy, and it's not the audience I wanted to cater to, but it was interesting to have their experience in addition. Then I had one conversation with Brendan Clark, who was very busy during these past 4 months, but was also super helpful in providing insights into how I was doing my research, and was able to correct my path during that research. Some of the really useful quotes or insightful quotes that I found during my interviews. Jessica from Canada said, "In Berlin, there's a huge need to learn German just so you can stand on equal footing and gain a little bit of respect from strangers." A bit harsh, but that's how she felt. Rue, living in Umeå from Toronto, said, "It's essential to learn the language in order to understand the culture better." And David from the UK, living in Madrid, learning Spanish, said, "You don't need that much language to get by." So finally, someone that was a bit hopeful and not too stressed out about the whole situation. That was also good to see. And then I went to observation. I collected notebooks. Turns out successful language learners tend to keep notebooks of just words that they write down. This is a notebook from someone who learned French in the middle of Quebec, where no English is spoken. So it was kind of interesting. In this notebook, there was words about woodworking and really the day-to-day grind. Identification stickers, the technique that I've seen common across different learners, where they would take like a Post-it or a piece of paper and tape, write a word in the target language, and then write a word in English or in their native language, and just stick it on different objects. And as they go about their day, kind of learn those words because they keep seeing those tags. I participated in a workshop at the Middelbare email with several immigrants that were trying to learn Swedish, and this was a conversation workshop that was held mostly by retired Swedish folk. So that was interesting to see because these people were not necessarily teachers, so it was interesting to see how they would approach the students and teach. Then I shadowed certain learners interacting with locals. After that, I read several books and papers, and one of the most insightful pieces I found was the 6 pillars of language learning. So accountability, I'm just going to go over them quickly. Accountability means that the learner needs to be aware that they are responsible for their own success, that they have to push themselves. Knowledge is a bit about methodology, so if you don't know anything about language learning, and those things are helpful, then maybe they should be shown, even though they're not part of the target language. Resources is, for example, text, video, audio, in the target language, stuff you can use to learn. Encouragement is kind of related to accountability in that it's about keeping the day-to-day motivation to keep going and keep learning the language even though it's difficult. Assessment is important because it allows to measure progress, and as such is related to encouragement. And planning is about setting distinct goals and breaking them down and setting dates to them and saying, I'm going to be at this point, I'm going to be able to go to the bank and do everything at the bank in the target language in 3 weeks. One preconception that is held by a lot of people is that kids and infants are the best at learning languages. It turns out they're only good because they have a lot of time on their hands. If you keep hammering someone's ears with the language, eventually it will go in. But it takes years. Adults can simulate these situations and adapt the situations to learn in a much more efficient way than kids and achieve the same results in months. So I was in this same paper, they were describing the ideal age for language learning being actually between 15 and 50 years old. This graph came from a paper about the acculturation process, and it shows clearly a huge spike of stress for people moving abroad. So that was a clear goal for me to say, if I can reduce the height of this spike, I have accomplished my goal. Then I set out to have ideas, and lots of ideas. And it was all about finding a lot of different ways to learn languages, because the existing systems that I have tried, as I said before, were very one-dimensional and would have people repeat the same exercises over and over. So I thought, just completely go out of the box and find several different ideas that had to do with pronunciation, reading, listening. How do you provide cultural insight at the same time as language learning and make those two happen at the same time? And most of these, because I was dealing and I wanted to deal with migrants, these are maybe not people that have so much time on their hands. So I thought, I'm going to try to keep these exercises short in time, between 1 and 5 minutes. And why not build a few of these and try them out on people? So I built a prototype called Guided Conversation. This came from the comment I got a lot during interviews, that a lot of people have difficulty building sentences when they're speaking. They have no problem writing because you can take all the time you want to do that, or listening. But when it came to speaking, they had to figure out the words and string them together. So kind of inspired by some video games where characters will tell you one thing and you have a choice of things to say. This was an interactive approach to encouraging people to speak. So, first demo. For example, here at the top I have the person asking me, hello, how are you today? And I have a list of replies. So let's try to reply that the weather is really great today, because it is. I'm fine, great weather today. So it recognizes that, and then it continues the conversation with something about the weather. So he's talking about the sun. It's really warm. It feels nice. Well, I don't think the northern lights are going to come anymore. It's too late. But it's going to rain in the afternoon. So then he says, well, better go enjoy the sun while it's out. So the idea here is rather than providing cookie cutter conversations, just like audiobooks offer a lot of the time, this time the learner has some agency into how the conversation progresses and can maybe have the same conversation again, but lead it in a different direction the next time. My next prototype is language acquisition projects. This was part of my research, and then I kind of brought it one step further. So LAPS came from a book I read that was made by the American Peace Corps, where they would, in order to learn a local language, they would have small pieces of paper or blocks with, up here we have times, so the day before yesterday, yesterday night, and then grammatical subjects, I, you, we, him, the baby. Then we have verbs, to play, to ride the bus, to sleep, to speak. Places, objects, clothes, so on and so forth. And the idea of which is you string them together and you make a sentence. And what I realized immediately, at least because I brought these to a Swedish learning workshop, is that they show grammar in a way that books can never explain. This sentence is, yesterday night I flew to the church with my friends. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, it's grammatically correct. If you were to say the sentence in Swedish, you would have to flip the verb. So yesterday night flew I and my friends to the church. This has to be this way if you're going to put yesterday night at the beginning. The bad thing about LAPS is that you needed someone who knew to tell you about this inversion. So I thought, why not take this one step further and program the intelligent behavior, program that knowledge into the small squares. So I built 3 prototypes in French, English, and Swedish, where words can be dragged from the top, where there were several words, and ordered into a sentence. So here, down here we have tomorrow, I, to eat, and plural of the, and then apples. So any word that's in green is correct, and any word that's in red kind of has something missing. So it's telling you I need a verb. And as such, this small program suggests grammar without teaching it in a very formal way, and I've gotten great feedback about this from testers. So if you see to eat becomes will eat, because we're talking about tomorrow. And a quote from Katsumoto on the blog All Japanese All the Time says, learning grammar in order to use a language is like learning organic chemistry in order to make a sandwich. It can be a lot of rules. You only need a tiny bit of them, and that's kind of what this prototype brings forth. Brings the resources from learning these, from having these different words, and then the knowledge of the grammar built into them as these words are ordered and stringed together. Lock screen flashcards are a really, I think, meaningful prototype because flashcards are kind of a hot topic in language learning in that they're super effective if you use them, but they're really, really boring. And I've heard stories of one guy, I did my deck of 10,000 flashcards and I know so much Japanese now. Well, good for you, but I don't think this is everyone's cup of tea. Turns out people who have smartphones look at them between 150 and 200 times every day. So I thought, why don't I put a flashcard on the first screen you see, which is the lock screen. It's the screen you first see when you touch a button on a mobile phone. So these, I wanted to think about the aspect of how do I put something in the face of the learner to say, hey, maybe you forgot about me, instead of sending like a weekly email, which I think I get 12 a week now because of all the things I've signed up to. So how do you hold people accountable for learning their language, the language in the country in which they are, and encourage them and poke them that way? So a quick demo. So this one goes really fast. And that's the idea. It doesn't take a lot of time. So right up there, this is my lock screen for my tablet. At the top, I have one Swedish word, its English translation, and if I decided to click into that and explore more, I could have its use in a sentence. So even though the level of interactivity is very low, the level of visibility is super high because it's brought on every time someone uses their device. The social profiler came from me really wondering about how do you make someone plan their language learning without them really sitting down with a calendar? And I thought, well, what if there was some intelligence that suggested different content to learn at different periods of time based on that person's personal life and interests and how they live? So I made this really bland, really boring looking back-end prototype where people can log into their Foursquare account and this will fetch the latest 20 check-ins on Foursquare that I've done. And this is a pretty good screenshot of anyone's life. So I go to university, cafes, gyms again, nightclubs, and liquor stores. Maybe I'd like to learn words related to these places because it's places that I visit on a daily basis. So even though this prototype doesn't look like much, it can live in the back end and help with the planning of language learning. Directed Chinese calligraphy is a prototype that I held off from for quite a long time because I thought, well, this is not language agnostic, it's language specific. But then I realized, well, why don't I reach into the richness of languages being wildly different from one another and exploit this? So in this particular prototype, you have a projection table with characters animating themselves with correct stroke order on a very large surface. So learners can just put a sheet of paper and trace these characters. So here's a sample of I love you. On the top is someone who's never written Chinese in their life, and on the bottom is a native Chinese speaker. So those are pretty good results. You can only see the difference if you look really close. Stroke widths and all that. Yeah. So then I continued having ideas like this, and I came up with 25 of them, all of which address different areas of listening, speaking, reading, writing, seeing, and doing. And speaking being the one that I address the most because it's, according to the interviews I had, it's the area of language that people want to really connect with the most and really want to be good at. So these cover all of the pillars of language learning as much as possible. They provide a great variety in the styles of learning and a great variety in how people acquire and are exposed to comprehensible input, and ideally can help learners live the language in the country where they're living much better. So I had all of this, and I had to make a project. So my goal for this was to outline a language learning system that facilitates integration in men and women between 13 and 50 who have migrated countries and would benefit from learning the local language in their new host country. The system would empower learners to acquire culturally relevant language knowledge so that it's better suited for local human interaction. And I had to package everything. So I thought, because I'm dealing with busy people, I wanted short interactions. These people would not have time at home to sit for an hour and a half in front of their computer or in front of a book to learn stuff. And I was reading some statistics about mobile usage in the world. In Egypt, for example, 70% of all internet access is done exclusively on mobile devices, and up to 25% in the United States of all internet access is done exclusively through a mobile device. So I thought, well, it's a good platform. So I started making paper interfaces, and I built a very own one-to-one scale paper prototype testing device. I got some feedback. I iterated on the paper prototypes, and I came up with lin'guage. Cue the video.
私は生まれた時からずっと東京に住んできて、毎日がすごく忙しかった。6ヶ月前に勉強するためにスウェーデンに移ってきたけど、何もかもが本当に違う。ここでは何もかもがゆっくり。これが今の私の生活。スウェーデン語を勉強することは私にとってすごく大切なこと。だって私は今ここに住んでるから。私の生活の中にあるレシートやお店の看板ももっと理解したいこと。たとえ毎日が忙しくても、lin'guageで単語や表現の仕方を得るのはとっても早くて簡単。例えば理科をオーダーするとき、ただ必要な言い方を見ればいいだけ。それから友達と発音の練習をするのが私の習慣。いつでもすぐに練習できるから本当に楽しい。友達を作ることはすごく大切。スウェーデン語を喋ること自体が今私がここにいるってこと。本当にありがとう、lin'guage。
So through having a logo, I wanted also to have different graphical variations of this logo because, as I said before, languages are wildly different. So I created this scheme of having the first spoken syllable or two of a language's name surrounded by the flag, the colors of the flag in which the country could be learned. And there's more about this in the report. And then also having it in the local script. The reason why I made this decision is because the name of the country where learners are living and the name of the language they will be learning is something they learn really, really quickly throughout the whole process. So even though you can't read a lot of these, they all say the name of the language in that language. I made a service blueprint, but I was more interested in covering the three main touch points of the service. But I thought it was a good idea to expand on those and see how they would be provided to people and how they could be used to interact with each other, so people with natives, learners with other learners, and then learners in their environment. And my three main touch points are the lin'guage mobile software, the personal dictionary, as well as customized branded objects. of which fulfill ideally 6 of the 6 pillars of language learning. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, "Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand." Having branded objects brings the learner outside of the regular in-class or in front of a book or in front of a computer experience, and really has them appreciate the beauty that can be a different language or a different culture without them necessarily thinking about, oh, I'm learning a language right now. So that is what branded objects are all about. In my case, I built a set of branded Chinese calligraphy brushes, as well as an interactive projection table. But in the report, there are more examples of how this could be used. The personal dictionary, this comes from the fact that research does show that writing things down, pen and paper, increases retention in memory very much. So I designed a very open-ended, yet guided experience of a notebook where one word detail page is presented. For Swedish, I have a small space for the grammatical gender of a noun, if it's a noun, and then the word, declensions of that word, and then its definition, and a sentence or multiple sentences where the word is used. This detail page should change depending on what is being learned, whether or not grammatical genders do exist, how many declensions are there, so on and so forth. And on the other page is a more one word in the target language, one word in the native language, that can be used in the wild. That can be really, you put this notebook in your pocket and you're riding the bus and you see a word on a billboard, and you can scribble it down and maybe address that later and really write down the details of that word when you have a bit more time. And then the lin'guage mobile application. For this presentation, I made it for someone who knows English and who would be learning Swedish, but this could be applicable to many situations. So instead of walking you through screenshots, built a fairly functioning prototype. So I'm going to walk you through it. The icon is down here, and when you first start it, it will find the learner's position, say we're preparing your course, and then it can say, oh, you seem to be located in Sweden, and it will offer to teach Swedish. So context is always important when dealing with global software. So in this case, we use geolocation to assess where the learner is. If they're still in their home country and they haven't moved yet, they can pick a different language. But let's stick with Swedish for now. And right away from this first screen, I've already taught the word yes. And then through a short questionnaire, I can assess what the learner is in the country to do. And this can help me to quickly organize what content to show first to the learner. So we are here to study, and we've taken a bit of Swedish before. Should the learner choose that they're not sure about their level of Swedish, there's a short assessment test to verify the level of skill in reading and listening. And then we tell the learner that this information helps us tailor the best possible Swedish course for you. This came from a lot of feedback of people when I was testing paper prototypes asking, why do you want to know this? And it's all part of the planning pillar, but it's nice to show that, well, you're giving us this information for you. We're starting with this. Here's the main screen. There are a series of challenges, all of which are really short, 1 to 5 minutes, can be done while sitting on the bus at the bus stop. So for example, let's see ordering at the restaurant. So here there's an order of progression from words. So several nouns, all about going to the restaurant, then followed by verbs. So what does betala means? Oh, eta means to eat. And then we can provide the learner with options to listen to this word in different dialects of the language, because this happens very frequently that several accents exist in the country. So not all of the Swedish accents were in that list. And then the learner can move on to learning sentences about how do we go to a restaurant and what can we do. And maybe order. And then maybe they want to know if the restaurant has a vegetarian alternative because they choose to eat that way. Or most importantly, if the coffee is included with the meal. And then an in-context short conversation can be presented where a scenario between the learner and the mock character, here a waiter, is played out in text and can be practiced beforehand, right before the interaction happens. One important aspect of using a mobile device like this is to be able to connect with other learners, because people who live in a different country and maybe from a different culture tend to hang out a lot with other expats. So in this case, my expat friend Charles, he's also using the lin'guage mobile application and watched this video about the development. So maybe I'm interested in watching it and learning what he learned. So in this case, I have the video playing up top from glorious 1979 Technicolor quality. And the lyrics of this Swedish song are presented to me, so I can really deep dive into what they're saying and practice listening to the pronunciation of these words. Once this is all said and done, I can evaluate my progress in my Swedish section, where I can see how many words I've learned versus how many words I've seen. The seen words are important because at a certain point in a learner's journey, they will come to realize that they don't need to see the definition or the translation of a word in order to understand it. So if, for example, I show a word 25 times to a learner in context, and they seem to have no problem with those sentences, maybe I'll move that word to learned, but I've never actually taught them. That's the beauty of MUN. Achievements are small tokens of recognition and encouragement. For example, for completing 10 days worth of challenges in a row, or having seen more than 500 words. Here there's also integration with the personal dictionary, where learners can take their personal dictionary, snap a photograph of it, and have those words added to the words that they've seen or that they've learned. Once the dictionaries run out, or can be purchased from inside the mobile software, because there is no desktop touch point to this experience. Everything has to happen through the mobile experience. The build a sentence is an expanded upon game of dragging the words onto the line. I will hand the mobile device to the jury because this rig doesn't support landscape. But before, I will talk about the tagging a photograph daily challenge. The tagging a photograph daily challenge is where learners are presented with a picture that ideally comes from someone who took it not far away from where the learner was physically located. The point of this activity is to click objects that you might know the name of and type them out, and effectively create a tag cloud for the entire picture. And then at the top, we're notified that there are 20 objects tagged in this picture that other learners have tagged. So the advantage of working on the internet like this is that we can have the benefit of several learners from a geographical area working on the same picture, tagging many words on the same image, and then we can end up with, for this one scene, many words. So are they having fika? Are they talking about the cup? Are they talking about glass on the table, or the table itself, or the window we're looking up from, or a large city? So by using local imagery, we can say, oh, well, this picture was taken in Beijing, and we're going to serve it to other people who are living in Beijing. And as such, local landmarks and cultural areas can be taught that way because they're relevant to people who will be living in that area, and maybe not for people who are living in Xi'an or some other area of China. So to build a sentence, learners are instructed to drag words from the blue gutter onto the green sentence line to score points. Points are scored according to 1 point per word per valid sentence. And I've color-coded the words so that cold colors are noun groups and warm colors are verb groups. So then you correct the sentence you've just built. So we ordered only once with a valid sentence. And the point of this is a bit to show that many simple sentences can be built with even fewer words, and to really show how words can be, how few words can be used to express a lot of meaning.
Go back once I would imagine that once I created something go back.
Yeah, so the point of this particular exercise was, for example, to score 14 points using only 8 words. So then you would have to shuffle these words around to make different sentences as to complete your 14 points, and also show that you don't need that many words to create that much meaning, to create a lot of meaning. And these would be words that have been shown to you, that have been taught to you through other challenges. So it's not just any random word that's thrown in there. And then it gives you there's 8 words to see. So that was the lin'guage mobile application, and that's all for me. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I wrote down